and then I'll read the housekeeping information.
We'll let Jason call the meeting to order and
Okay.
then you can do that. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Calling the meeting to order. My name is Jason Galkin, Chair of the Partnership Grants Committee here. And you can do the housekeeping so we can get ourselves started.
Okay, Kim.
All right. Welcome to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Partnership Grants Committee meeting. Thank you for joining us. We are using Zoom with the goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you would like to make a comment during the meeting, please use the raise hand feature. Please utilize this tool to virtually indicate that you would like to speak in order for the chair to facilitate the discussion. As a friendly reminder, this meeting is recorded, and please be aware of the surroundings behind you. All LCFC and committee meetings will be posted to the State Bar's website. Zoom captioning is available. To enable, select live transcript at the bottom of your Zoom screen and then select enable audio transcript. Thank you.
All right, Angela, do you want to go ahead and make any other pre-meeting announcements and then take roll?
Yes, let's do roll call. So Galkin.
Here.
Gonzalez.
Here.
Iskin.
Here.
Cruz. Lee.
Here.
Excellent. That was roll call.
Awesome. At this point in time, we can have anyone who would like to make public comment go ahead and come forward to do so. We're going to allocate 2 minutes for each of those individuals if we have any, and I know we have someone with their hand raised. I don't know if that's someone for public comment, but we can go ahead and move forward with that.
Okay, hold on a second.
Hey, good morning. Good morning. I see Leah is on her way to keeping the public from speaking. If you guys look on your website for previous meetings, you're going to see that Leah has not posted up the Friday meeting because I got to zoom in, showing my face and demonstrating that she actually lied on the State Bar website when she claimed that she was working for Resource Development Associates for 18 months when she only worked there for 13 months, when she decided that she was going to cut me off and just hang up on me. Now, I don't think that is what you guys are supposed to do at all, is it? Are you supposed to hang up on us when you don't like what we're saying? Well, tonight, starting at 4 o'clock, if you guys do look at VanessaHolton.com, I'm going to be doing a Twitch channel. And Leah, I'm going to ignore you for a while. I'm going to be going after Judge Margaret Mann's emails, and I'm going to be petitioning Dr. Drake under the Freedom of Information Act as well for all the emails that are up on VanessaHolton.com for the University of Berkeley. You remember she told me that, what was it, Dana Roche couldn't find those emails? Well, I'm going to make sure that Dr. Drake is aware that we are going to be finding those emails and that we will be posting them on the website so everybody can see. And for those of you who aren't aware of what happened, I filed a State Bar complaint against Vanessa Holton a little while back, and she filed a police report that you guys kept open for 2 years so that she could protect herself. Isn't that lovely? Isn't that what you guys are not supposed to do? Hold police departments that keep a false report open? Check out the website. It's got documents from the State Bar and from the San Rafael Police Department showing they kept it open for 2 years and nobody seemed to care. So when you guys start looking at how you support the public here, you guys pretty much suck. Everything that goes on at the State Bar, the Chief Trial Counsel, they're screwing over the people of California to protect themselves. And I'm going to stop that. So tonight on Twitch, again, I'm going live.
You're about done with your 2 minutes there. So you can go
Isn't it supposed to be 3 minutes, by the way, not 2 minutes? That's what the rules usually say. So how did you guys come up with only 2 minutes today? Shame, shame, shame on you. You guys are just playing games with the rules just to suppress the public speech, isn't it? Well, Leah Wilson just got a state bar complaint filed against her, and a good email went out. So in
Jason, or if I could just ask Angela, is there a rule regarding the length of public comment? Does anybody know?
There is. I'll pull it up right now and double check, but I believe it's 2 to 3 minutes, and our practice has been for 2 minutes for public comment, but I'll double check that and pull that up right now.
Yeah.
But we try to be consistent across and use the timer to be transparent.
Well, if there is no rule, I might suggest 1 minute.
There
And
is
then
a- yeah.
at the discretion of the chair, it could be expanded if it appears important. Anyway, sorry. Move
Thanks,
on.
Eric. No, that's all right. Moving on, want to introduce all the members of the committee to one of our new committee members, Eloina Gonzalez. Eloina, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself to everyone and kind of give a little bit of background of where you're from and joining our group here. I'm sure everyone will be interested to hear.
Sure, I'm happy to. I am Eloina Gonzalez. I am currently the Self-Help Center Managing Attorney and the Family Law Facilitator in Alameda County. And I have been with the Alameda County Superior Court for 16 years now. This is my 16th year. And prior to my time with the Superior Court in Alameda County, I was a attorney with the Family Violence Law Center, and prior to that with Law Center for Families, which is a nonprofit that unfortunately is no longer around. But all of my time since law school has been with nonprofits and public agencies. So I'm happy to be here. I have a lot of experience working with our court partners on partnership grants. So we have several partnership grants right now with legal aid agencies in Alameda County. So I will recuse myself from any decisions or votes regarding grants and grant applications from Alameda County. So if you're wondering why I'm doing that, that is why. But yeah, I have a lot of firsthand experience working with our court partners, and yeah, so I'm really happy to be here. I know the value of these programs. I know how we are able to increase access to justice with these grant partnerships. Our staff is limited in terms of how many folks we can help every day. So having these partnership grants allows us to serve more members of the public, more self-represented litigants who really have no other alternatives, obviously who can't afford to hire their own attorney. So I'm a huge proponent and supporter of these programs.
Great, thanks, Eloina. Your experience sounds like a perfect fit for our group here. So I'm really happy to have you as part of our committee.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. With that, we'll move on to agenda item 3.1, which is approval of minutes from July 19th. And I would happily entertain a motion if someone was so inclined to make one approving those minutes.
I'll move.
Anyone? Second?
I was second.
All right. Angela, do you mind taking a roll for that?
No problem. Galkin,
Yes, I'm not used to going.
Gonzalez,
Am I able to vote on this one? I'm sorry.
You are. It's a vote of confidence in the others that the minutes are accurate.
Yes.
Iskin. Oh,
Yes.
Lee.
Yes.
So moved.
Wonderful. Moving on to discussion and action items. We'll start with action item 4.1, which is on budget revision and carryover requests for 2023 partnership grants. Angela is going to give us an update on those. Angela, I think you're muted if you're trying to talk.
So, and my sense is that you're seeing the notes slides, right? So
We
you're
aren't
not.
seeing notes yet, but the presentation mode doesn't
Mhm.
look like it's going yet, the slideshow part. I can just see the full PowerPoint screen.
One moment while I try to amend that. I'm having a little bit of a par for the course today, folks. And I don't want to delay us any further. So we're going to roll with this version since everyone can see what is needed to be seen, I'm assuming. Yes. Okay. So this is, one moment, please. We are on agenda item 4.1, action on budget revision and carryover requests for the 2023 partnership grants. So this is just kind of a reminder that their 2022 PG 2.0 and 2023 partnership grant budget revisions and carryover requests had a final, this time period covers up until December 31st of 2023, and grantees had a final deadline of January 1st, 2024 to submit any requests for budget revisions or carryovers. Going forward for 2024 grantees, there will be a rolling process where they will be able to submit budget revisions ongoing. So there won't be that period or that deadline, excuse me. So this is just what the deadline to submit requests that we received by January 31st, 2024. There were 7 budget revision requests. 3 were for requests below 10%. 3 were for requests between 10 and 25%. 1 was for 25% or more, the deviation. There were 2 carryover requests. 1 was for between 10 and 25%, and 1 for 25% or more. Just as a reminder or new for our new committee member, there is an approval process where requests that are below 10%, no approval is required. Between 10 to 25%, State Bar staff has the approval discretion, and then requests over 25%, it's required that the grantee gets Legal Services Trust Fund Commission approval. So that being said, the one that is beyond that threshold was from Elder Law and Advocacy, and they had a budget revision amount. The request for revision was $29,478, which represented a 28.1% of their total budget. And the rationale that they provided was that they had made a different choice in the technology for the public stations. So instead of kiosks, they were installing enhanced laptop stations. These will be less expensive than kiosks, but will provide an excellent user experience. There's a lot of work still to be done on this project, hence both the carryover request that I'll speak to in a moment, and then there were some adjustments in how they were using their budget, and adjustments to both technology funds and staff funds to manage and supervise this project. So they were also planning to increase the lead attorney time at the court clinic. So that's the budget revision request. And then there was also a carryover request in the amount of $31,899, and this represented 30% of their total grant amount. The recommendation from State Bar staff was to approve. And that is the request. So
Hey,
that being
Angela,
said,
can I ask you a question?
please.
Just as on this, so they're moving from kiosks to laptops. Kiosks are less expensive. What you don't say on your slide here, you mentioned the budget revision amount. Are they suggesting that they're going to be spending 29,000 less than they had budgeted, or?
No, not 29,000 less. They're just adjusting the appropriation of funds from one category to another. And this is from staffing to equipment funds. So it was an adjustment to how they had previously conceived of their budget. They were apportioning that 29,478 to just a different category of funds. So still spending the same amount of money, but just in a different way than they had initially conceived.
Okay.
And for clarification, on the budget revision, is it all one category to another? And if so, do you know what category it was and what category they're proposing it to be?
I don't have that in front of me in this moment. I could follow up and present that to you, but you're asking specifically which category of funds was.
Yeah. I mean, if their revision is, hey, we were thinking about spending approximately $30,000 on this, and now we're going to spend it on that. I'm just curious. I was curious what the thing is. I mean, in reading their description, it sounds like, it's less on kiosks and more on attorney time, just in how they've described this, and that laptops are less expensive than their kiosks, so their outlay for that is less, and they're spending more on attorney time, which to me is, my initial take is that sounds good to me. Sure, like more attorney time at the clinic sounds good, but I'm just not sure where that's coming from. So that was the curiosity.
Yeah, and I can certainly pull that up, but I just don't have access to it in this exact moment. We can also get our fiscal person on the available to answer the specific categories, so we can give you more information.
I'm trying to pull that up, Angela, right now, see if I can quickly bring that up. So if I would say a couple of options, if you're comfortable voting on it as is, generally with the description, we can move forward with that. If you want to move to the next agenda item while we pull that up, we'll also share that information during this.
If you think that it's reasonably quick to get it, might make it easier for folks to make a motion from a well-informed position. That would be my suggestion, and we can move on to 4.2 while we're working on gathering that data, and then come back to 4.1 for a vote.
Okay. That being said, let's roll to 4.2. So this topic is agenda item 4.2, the recommend request for proposals and rubric for the 2025 partnership grants. I'm assuming everyone has received the materials, which were made available. So we're going to start with just a brief reminder of where the Partnership Grants Committee was at on 7/19/2023. So the committee met, and we're doing sort of a reflection on the 2024 partnership grant cycle. And we wanted to start with just a summary of some of the takeaway from that initial reflection meeting. So the suggestions from the committee at that time was that the overall process was effective, just in general, but there were some specific suggestions along the lines of streamlining and shortening the 2025 partnership grants materials wherever possible. This is something we heard. Also, clearly defining the target audience and how projects are tailored to that underserved population. So asking the applicants to clearly define their target audience and how their projects are tailored. Less about which county is providing services and more about who is being served was what the committee members were interested in hearing more about. The committee members said, requested clearer guidance for reviewers on scoring the funding priority section. There was some discussion about explicitly defining new and rural, those terms. The committee members thought to, continue encouraging new projects, but not at the expense of well-run, long-standing projects, is something we heard. As well, the suggestion was to prioritize underserved communities. So those who do not have access to legal services, not just rural communities. That was something the committee said. And then to continue to encourage innovation is what we heard. So with that as the sort of starting place, staff did, a deep dive into the materials and the partnership grants application and the rubric and the previous RFP, and then came up with some modifications, some adjustments, if you will. The first recommendation is to broaden the funding priorities rubric category to projects that support underserved populations. So currently in the 2024 version, the rubric provides that reviewers consider factors that include, but are not limited to, whether the project is new, and whether the project supports unmet rural needs. The suggestion or the recommendation is to broaden this category to underserved populations and then include supporting unmet rural needs as one example among several. So we have the proposed rewording of this category. The language would read, whether a population is underserved may be based on factors such as unmet rural needs, or on the population comprising individuals with particular characteristics who are underserved in the particular county, including but not limited to characteristics based on race, ethnicity, age, limited English proficiency, disability status, and veteran status. So that's the recommendation, the first recommendation that we had. And I think I'll roll through all three, and then I imagine, Jason, you'll want to open it up for discussion, or is that how you'd like to proceed? Okay. So the next recommendation was to remove, there was a separate other policies section from the end of the RFP. And our recommendation was to remove that as a separate, add-on section, and instead integrate the policy guidance into the materials where they're appropriate and relevant. Just making it more likely that the applicant will have the information where they need. So the four different policy recommendations that were at the end were self-representation and attorney-client relationships, overhead administration and audit, use of partnership funding as a subgrant covering wages of court staff, and then funding of supervised settlement services through partnership grants. So these were just four policies that added specific guidance on those topics. And just as an example, we added language directly to the RFP's eligibility requirements section, providing more detailed explanation of, what constitutes a joint court qualified legal services project and self-represented civil litigants. So we put we integrated the policy guidance directly into the materials. So that was our second recommendation. And then our third recommendation was streamlining the application, the RFP, the rubric, application instructions, and the grant-making timeline. So staff looked at all the content and really found ways to shorten, rearrange, or rephrase non-substantively. So this isn't changing the content, but rather just increasing clarity and efficiency. So we consolidated sub-questions, reordered sections to improve flow and better align with the RFP. So the application and the RFP were sort of aligned more clearly. So that was one set of work that we did with the materials. And then another streamlining that we recommended was the condensing the PG administration calendar. So down from 7 months to 5 months. And then this is from the application release date to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission meeting for approval. So shortening that timeline. And then decreasing the number of partnership grant committee meetings from 4 to 3. And so some things some other things that we did streamlining were moving the application release to April instead of January, and moving the initial calibration to June instead of April. And so the benefits of this is it gives grantees more clarity about, or transparency into the process. They have less time from when they submit the application until when they actually hear a result. So we thought that would be advantageous. It also would provide the reviewers and staff an opportunity to have evaluation data, synthesized and used as part of the review process, which we saw from 2024 that would be more helpful. So and then it also links more closely to the release of the State Budget Act when we learn what the final funding amount is. So getting sort of tightening the timeline. So that was the third recommendation that staff was making. And then I have example slides of what the rubric will look like. So I will just run through those, I imagine, until somebody stops me. So this is the eligibility requirements. We didn't have any changes that we were proposing. Here's the selection criteria section. Again, looks very similar with just some slight modification of the language, just improving for clarity. Administration, continuity planning, and evaluation. The same categories as you previously had seen, with maybe just some slight, wordsmithing just to improve clarity. And the funding priorities, this is the area where we did have that marked recommendation that's different. So at this point, and this is the 2025 recommendation, one is whether the project is new. So in making decisions regarding funding priorities, consider factors that include but are not limited to whether the project is new. And then, the commission maintains discretion to determine what is considered a new project and may consider factors that include but are not limited to whether the project was previously or currently funded or proposes a substantial change to an existing service delivery model. And then here's this added language, or this revised language, whether the project supports underserved populations. Whether a project is underserved may be based on factors such as unmet rural needs, or on the population comprising individuals with particular characteristics who are underserved in the particular county, including but not limited to characteristics based on race, ethnicity, age, limited English proficiency, disability status, and veteran status.
So
So
if the project is old but good, guess maybe it gets a 1 unless it serves underserved populations based on that definition. I'm trying to think who would be get a low score on this. I mean, if some of the traditionally older projects that we have continued to fund are those kind of out like in Jason's area, kind of out there in remote areas. I guess maybe that's rural, I suppose. I don't know. So maybe they would continue to be funded. So who doesn't win on this? Maybe like a public council or a Beit Tzedek or something. In the middle of a city that serve poor people, but not of any particular identified character. I don't know, help me out on this. I mean, I'm not quite sure how we're gonna.
So perhaps that what you just described, that scenario, perhaps they wouldn't receive points for funding priority, right?
Right.
So if it was, I guess when I look at this and I think of, our review sessions last summer, if it was a new project, then that would be clearly a 1. They would get a point for that. And then if it was some underserved population, let's say, in this rural out by Jason, that would be, another point for that. And then perhaps this, it's a category of folks that are, limited English proficiency. Perhaps that's a 3rd point. So that would just be one idea of how this would apply. And just a reminder, during our calibration session is when I think we are going to get clarity and alignment on how we're all perceiving and using these categories and scoring applications. So how does that sound, that scenario that I just described? Anything you'd want to add, Jason, or?
Yeah, just really quick, I think, to the Beit Tzedek question. I think the language used to be, right, the last go around, it was much more of a new or rural, right? And that was how you got your points. I think the now we're saying rural is one way, unmet rural needs, or if you're serving, in LA County or somewhere that isn't rural, you can still get points in funding priority if your service is targeting some unmet needs in that county, from otherwise underserved populations, however that is articulated. So it might be on the basis of race or ethnicity, age, proficiency in English, et cetera, et cetera. So we're saying, okay, if you're in LA, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not serving an underserved population. It's what is the underserved population.
It's okay, but if you're just I mean, just I don't know, maybe a little silly, but if you're just serving garden variety poor people, I mean,
I think that's a good question, right? I think that might not get us.
So if you're a Beit Tzedek or a public council or an inner city law center, you got to kind of posture it so that you're targeting a particular, fostered youth or whatever, something, you
Yeah.
know.
I think that's a good point, Eric, because you've got, in the broader stroke of it, right? The underprivileged financially that these organizations serve, that all of the organizations who could be recipients of these funds serve, are underserved, period. And which is why we do what we do, right? So how closely are we slicing up the pie so that we're targeting the underserved of the underserved, I guess, is what this is getting at. Louina has her hand up, so.
I will figure out how to put my hand down in just a minute. But does the top bullet carry more points than the bottom bullet? For example, it's not a new project, but they serve multiple of the underserved communities. How could an agency still get a 3 if it's not new? But
I
it
don't think
serves.
the top bullet, no, I think they're equal.
Okay, so these are just two sort of priorities, and we could still score an agency as, or the application as a 3, even if it's not new.
Right. So to Angela's point, and the lead buried here is that as we get to calibration, you know, we talk about like, how rigid do we want to apply it? Does it only get a 3 if it's new, rural, and meets underserved, or is it, you know, a little bit less prescriptive than that? And we've had a few rounds in the last few years of how we're going to apply these, we'll call it the 3 basis points for the 15 points. And I'm not sure we've ever successfully gotten uniformity in how to apply it. There's understandable variance between committee members and how broadly. I think generally we agree that there's a little bit of this concept. The new part is, you know, the PG grants as being, we'll call it seed money to develop increased, you know, and expanding. You know, that's the origin of the new. But as Eric mentioned, we've got a lot of organizations that have been around for a while and do really good work. That's really important that we want to consistently provide funding for. So how do we balance those to make sure we're providing incentives, but we're not really undermining the good work that's already being done? So that is the perpetual challenge on how we are scoring these funding priorities. I think in past sessions, we've talked a little bit about how some of the more developed, the developed institutions tend to score a little bit higher in some of the other categories, where some of the newer, less proven organizations don't tend to score as high because they're not as, you know, they're not as seasoned. And this gives them a little bit of a, we'll call it a bonus to get in the door, to develop the credibility and, you know, institutional connections for, you know, for funding from other sources. That's another pressure point for rural, where that was serving as a bit of a proxy for, you know, if you're an established provider of legal services in LA, you might have more access to, you know, donations or funding streams to facilitate, you know, standing up the organization, and you'll score higher in pursuing those things. Whereas up in the North State, right, in rural California, the viability of those options might be few and far between. So as a result, as an organization, you may be more dependent on these kind of grants to sustain. And that's not necessarily a reflection on the quality or benefit of the work that you do, so much as it is on the availability of resources to fund a program in that area. So I think all of these criteria are an exercise in trying to strike a balance between all of these conflicting pressures to make sure we're getting funding out to provide services to needed communities, with recognition that there's not enough funding to fund all of the projects that could be out there given the scope of the need. So I think that's kind of how we've modeled this. as imperfect as this tool might be, to do so.
Jason, if I may just also share that in the 2025 partnership grants application, we sort of rephrase some of the requests for description from the grantees. That is, asking them specifically to detail how, more about the community that they're serving, how it's underserved, those kinds of things. So we're hoping for more descriptive information from the applicants that will help you all as reviewers really better understand the target audience that they're aiming for. So that's some of the hope in that adjustment.
I will say that I am curious to Eric's point about the socioeconomically underserved populations, which are targeted by likely all of the applicants, right? Even if not as specific. And we're saying included but not limited to all these other categories. Well, that's a pretty darn big category of underserved. And is it a glaring omission that we're not mentioning how that gets considered here? Might be. I'm curious to see what will come up.
So if I may advance to the next slide, unless there are, so the other, the optional innovation category, you'll recall from 2024. So for 2025, we've just reworded some of the descriptive language in the rubric. So saying again that the commission may exercise discretion in awarding points for innovation. Based on your review of the proposal, determine if you wish to score additional points for innovation and provide your reason below. And then we have this language. In deciding to award additional points for innovation, consider factors such as whether the project explores new ways of providing services or using technology, offers an initial case type, like, first consumer program or first conservatorship program, or applies a model that was successful in another jurisdiction but is new to this court. So that's the description around innovation. That, again, the calibration sessions will provide us an opportunity to actually practice using this rubric on 3 applications and then discussing collectively, how that went and arriving at some sort of alignment and how we're scoring. That's the thinking. But I wanted to share that language with you since we did we added more language here in the descriptor. So
I'm waiting to see who promotes that they're going to be using AI in their formulation of documents or something.
It'll be really interesting to see. Yeah, I think that's why we wanted to be a little more transparent, as Angela mentioned, and identifying some of these examples and things that could be looked at as innovative. So it'll be, especially with the technology piece, really interesting to see.
At the time. So those were slides showing the rubric and sort of our thinking behind the 3 recommendations. So this would be the resolution. Should the Partnership Grants Committee concur with staff's proposal, passage of the following resolution is recommended. Resolved that the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Partnership Grants Committee recommends to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission approval of the request for proposal and scoring rubric for 2025 partnership grants as described in staff's February 6, 2024 memorandum.
Any questions about the recommendation and drafted resolution? And if not, we'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
I will go ahead and second this, Chair. So reply.
So let me do a roll call then. Galkin,
Yes.
Gonzalez,
Yes.
Iskin,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
so moved.
Wonderful. All right, well,
Okay.
were we able to capture our data for 4.1 by chance? We can knock that out. Not to bounce around too much, but
Yeah, we do have an update. Should we do that now? Angela, were you still on this item or?
No, we can, I can stop sharing. Or are you have a screen you want to share with you?
No, but I do have an update, and
Okay.
our colleague Esteban, who is our lead on budget revisions and carryover requests from our fiscal team, is available to answer any questions. So there is one correction. So I think it was very prudent of the committee to ask for more detail. As Angela mentioned, I'm happy to see if I can accurately describe or provide the update, and then Esteban is available to answer any questions if there are any. As Angela mentioned, this is the deadline was January 31st. And so with very short turnaround time to get the follow-up information needed from grantees and then prepare these numbers for this meeting, it seems that the budget revision request piece actually should have dropped off. This is actually only a carryover request. So the description is still accurate. The rationale is what the grantee provided, but the request is that carryover amount and carryover percentage. The staff recommendation is still approval. Just to provide a little bit of context about our process in case increases we're not, there's any questions there, is our fiscal team looks at the request, crunches the numbers, does the calculation, follows up with grantees about any questions, and then based on the criteria that is used and outlined in the memo, what to look at, see if there's any questions, and then makes a recommendation and coordinates with our committee coordinators. Angela, for partnership, doing an excellent job on your first meeting as committee coordinator. I think just the timing piece, maybe there's a little bit of a disconnect, and we should have removed the budget revision piece. And Esteban is on, happy to answer any questions there might be. Just wanted to provide that clarification. Why it took a little bit longer to confirm that data when looking at the request that came in.
all right.
Okay, so now I'm a little confused. All right, so I guess what you're saying is they're not proposing to shift funds around. What they're proposing is to carry over $29,000 of their $105,000 grant.
That's what I understood just now, but I asked him, Esteban, we were just chatting online, so I may have misrepresented that, and I wanted to make sure that you heard directly from our staff member who has that information been communicating. So Esteban, if you don't mind confirming the carryover that is accurate, and then where we are with the budget revision.
Sure. So unfortunately, when I was doing the calculations, the budget modification piece, one of the data, I mean, one of the amounts was zero out. So it gave me that $29,000 budget revision request. However, when I review it, because I went to see like the specific line item, I realized it was not zero. It was actually the same amount, meaning there is no budget revision, but there is a carryover request of 30%. So the budget revision is zero. They are not moving any funds between line items, but they are requesting a carryover of $31,899 to use in the next coming quarters. So there is the rationale is correct. That's everything they provided. The carryover, it's indeed 30%, and the amount is correct, but there is no budget revision.
Why are they carrying over? Because they weren't able to spend the money last year?
Correct. So they are mostly carrying over money. Let me double check here. I have it open. 1 second. So they are requesting to carry over funds to cover mostly, yes, personnel items. So yeah, lawyers, as well as, employee benefits. They're also requesting to carry over money for telecommunications. And that's about it. So yeah, the money they're requesting to carry over to cover those line items. But yeah, that's the money they were not able to spend in the grant period. So they're planning to spend it now in the following 2 quarters.
Thank you. Appreciate you being available to hop on live look at the forms that I wasn't able to pull up for Angela during the call. So appreciate it. So it sounds like the rationale is explaining the line items they're hoping to have additional 6 months if the carryover is approved to make the adjustments described in this paragraph.
Do you want to, Angela, bump down to slide 7 and reconsider the motion, given the new information about whether that 30% carryover should be approved by the committee?
Certainly. So the recommendation would be, should the Partnership Grants Committee concur with staff's recommendation as presented at the February 6th meeting, passage of the following resolution is recommended. Resolved that the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Partnership Grants Committee recommends to the LSTFC that it approve Elder Law and Advocacy's carryover request as presented at its February 6, 2024 meeting. So we will remove the budget modification request part of this resolution.
In the end, just technically.
And the and. Yes.
All right. Anyone willing to make that motion for us?
Angela, are you making live edits in this slide?
It was going to.
Okay, great. I just didn't see it reflected yet.
Yep.
Before the vote takes place.
Yep.
Angela's got a floating text box there.
Yeah.
Preventing her from doing so.
Thank you. We have technical difficulties. Everyone is safe with weather. Hopefully everyone is
a little embarrassed,
dry.
but my mouse is not. I don't know why this is not working for me. How embarrassing.
It happens. Don't worry
It
about
happens, right, Eric? Oh,
Well,
okay.
feel free if you want to send me the link. I'm happy to try to see if I have.
Okay. I'm using my cursor. Maybe that'll do it.
Delete. Yeah.
There you go.
There we go.
Awesome.
Boom.
When the mouse fails, use the cursor. Okay, so I heard, I'm sorry, Jason, you made a motion? Was that correct?
I called for a motion.
You called for a motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
In second.
So we'll do roll call then. Galkin,
Yes.
Gonzalez,
Yes.
Iskin,
Yes.
Lee,
Oh, I saw his mouth move.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes.
Okay, so moved. And
All right. Thank you, everyone, for tolerating the jumping around. Appreciate that. And now we'll move on to Angela's going to share a preview of the timeline and application process for the 2025 partnership grants. So if you want to go ahead, Angela, with that.
Sure. So what we first wanted to present was just kind of the general partnership grants timeline. We thought this might be helpful to just, sort of not that know these specific days, but to see the contours of the timeline. So as we've mentioned before, we've tightened up the timeline some. So in April is when the partnership grant RFP and application will be released on Smart Simple. May is the application deadline. June through July, Partnership Grants Committee reviews applications. And then in July is when the committee would develop a tentative funding recommendation. In August, the commission meeting to approve the recommendation. And then in September is when the Judicial Council meets to approve the awards. And October through November is the budget confirmation. December would be grant agreements. And then you've got January through December 31st is the grant period. And then the following year in March is when evaluations are due. So this is kind of the generic timeline that we just wanted to share with you. And then a quick preview of the application review process that folks will all be involved in. So first, there will be a staff initial calibration to develop the staff score, and then staff and the full Partnership Grants Committee will participate in an initial calibration of 3 selected applications. And so we will, this is when this calibration process will happen, and we will evaluate and make sure we're all sort of aligned in our reviewing. Then staff and the Partnership Grants Committee members will review and score all the remaining applications. We don't know this number yet because to be determined how many projects are submitted. And during these review sessions, there will be about 5 to 6 applications per session. After all applications are scored, then the review team will develop a tentative funding recommendation to bring forward to the Partnership Grants Committee, the whole committee. And then the committee will meet to determine a final funding recommendation. So that's kind of the overview of the process that several of you have already been through. So it sounds very familiar. And then the next thing I want to share is just more granularly all the dates and deadlines that you have to look forward to. So we've got, for instance, this has when the application deadline is May 9th. We obviously will, or maybe not obvious, but we'll be doing office hours for potential applicants. So we'll be, eager to share with them, any guidance on filling out the application. May 20th is when we will select the 3 proposals for initial calibration. And then you could just see these additional dates sort of filling in more granularly what we expect to have happen over the next few months. So and we've got the Judicial Council meeting September 19th, where they approve the grant recommendations. And in October, we'll email grantees regarding the funding determinations. So those are just some specific dates and deadlines. And then the only other thing I would say is that, we have some next actions as staff to build out the application now in Smart Symbol, the application that we've, sort of consolidated and adjusted some, create application instructions for the applicants when they fill out the application. So there's an instructions document that they get. Create a review guide for the reviewers. So we'll be developing that. And the last thing I would say is that our next actual Partnership Grants Committee meeting would be on June 6th.
So are we involved in approving that, we being the committee, this revised application and the instructions, or is that something staff is going to do?
So that was under the third bullet where the third recommendation that we had, where we were, streamlining and making non-substantive changes to the application. Yeah, that was, that's something that we weren't intending on bringing forward as like an application document to share with the committee. Not sure if Rocio has thoughts on that, but all the changes that we were suggesting were non-substantive. It's, some wordsmithing and consolidation of, previously there were some, higher questions and then sub-questions under, and now we've just collapsed those into a single like descriptor where we ask applicants, please describe, A, B, C, D, and then some like subparts within a single question rather than having kind of so many sub-questions.
Yeah.
Well, I don't necessarily, I'm not suggesting we need to approve it, but I'm just wondering, since we're not, I would just be, if we're streamlining the application in consistent with recommendations that this committee made, I think it would be interesting to see, or just to see a red line version to see if it really is any simpler or whatever. I'm just wondering, I'll just make this comment for future reference. I don't think we need to do anything different, but so we're not releasing the application till April. So I wonder if it would have been maybe better, maybe to think about for next year. Instead of having this meeting in February, which seems kind of early, given an April release date, maybe have it in March or closer to the release date, so the committee can actually just look at the whole package. And if we have any comments on it, we can give them to you. If we don't, we don't.
I'll just share that it takes a considerable amount of time to, depending on the varying priorities, to build this out in the system and do testing and make sure that we also then set up all the related materials, get remediated, like the instructions, and likewise to make those updates. So we do try to provide some buffer between getting committees and or commissions approval on the direction of some of those changes, so that then administratively staff can implement those. And so some of the streamlining pieces that Angela mentioned were built into today's recommendation is based on feedback that the committee provided in last year's scoring. I think Angela alluded to this, and I still remember being part of, also having participated as part of the scoring, where commissioners and part of the scoring team in general would have said like, oh, this question seems to imply this question, that the answer would be here, but we found it over here. And so we went back and just ensured that the language and the instructions were clear and better aligned with what you approved today for the RFP and then the scoring rubric. Just being transparent, I think some of our other applications had more recent sweeps for this purpose, and maybe partnership grant hadn't just yet. And so that was something that we were intentional about, and assuming that there was approval for this RFP, we'll now go through and match those pieces out and make sure that it's clear, more transparent, and that we capture the data that the commission and the scoring team is looking for to align with the rubric. We're always happy to share more information. So if that's something that the committee would want to look at, kind of more of the implementation, how the administrative pieces. So always happy to do that. Just wanted to provide a little bit of context about that buffer and wanting to ensure that if there were any concerns and we needed to pivot or make any changes, that it would allow and not impact the release date.
Well, I mean, again, I don't necessarily need to get into the weeds of approving anything, but I would be interested in seeing, once you finish your work, maybe even outside of a committee meeting, I'd be interested in seeing a redlined version of the application, just to, I don't know, just to see if it seems simpler to me. I mean, there's a difference between approving ideas in concept, right, which is what we did today, and actually seeing how they're played out. So anyway, I think that's, because I agree. I think the application has been kind of overly complicated and could benefit from some streamlining. I totally agree with that.
And one thing we also are looking at, and from the Smart Simple or grants management platform in general, is looking at what where there are, maybe now that we have a rubric that's being used per the recent rule changes, what areas to score on, which we saw there, to see if there's an opportunity to use common fields across grants. So rather than looking at partnership grants specifically and maybe, clarifying just there and doing it separately for another one, if there are common questions that can be applied across the board to also increase transparency and just consistency from a grantee perspective too, that may be applying to multiple grants. And so just wanted to share a little. We're always happy to share more on the administrative side. We also try to kind of pull out the high level pieces. So Eric, if you're interested in more detail, we're always happy to share that in advance of when you would see it in terms of looking at the application itself.
So here's a comment that goes the other way. More delegation to staff. One of the things that came up at the offsite last week was the idea raised by Elizabeth, who's not part of this committee, of, maybe as a committee, do we want to think about just having an initial calibration session where we kind of get the views of the whole committee about how bids are supposed to be graded, but then instead of having the commissioners involved in reading all of the remaining applications, delegate to staff completely, well, not completely, but delegate to staff the idea of going through an initial calibration of the proposals, and which staff would then bring back to the committee. I don't know, what do people think about that? I'm not sure I like it, but at least that was a discussion point that came out of the offsite last week.
I think that I want to say that came up. I can't remember what cycle it was or what grant it was, and I think Selena had expressed a while back in this discussion that there was some likely concerns from would-be grant recipients about the lack of involvement and review by commissioners themselves. So not just in, okay, we're providing oversight, but and actually personally reviewing them. And there was a desire to do that somehow and see that somehow. And I think I tend to agree with that. I'm happy to delegate a lot to staff to do the workup, but I think anything that takes away commissioners from having a review opportunity for each of the applications, even if it is later in the cycle and how we do it and time it, I think reduces that involvement, and that would be a likely concern to grantees or would-be grantees. That would be my hesitation. On the other issue about the application, you know, I tend to agree that it would be good to see how things are phrased. One additional way we could approach that is, you know, like we provided all the feedback to adjust the rubric for this go around and how we do that. I mean, it could be a good opportunity to do a post-mortem of the applications and look through and like, okay, well, here are some of the things we saw in our applications and where it seemed like people were struggling, and reflect back on how the application may be remodeled for the next go around. So to address things that we have observed, and, you know, they seem to address it here rather than here, and how do we clean that up? Not to say that having it in advance, you know, at this stage is bad, but it might be also useful in the post-mortem review in the same way that we're thinking about how we're doing the scoring group.
Absolutely. And I think, Jason, on that point, is maybe unofficially what staff tried to capture as the scoring was taking place. And we heard that feedback. I know that we had notes on that, and Angela shared kind of high level, but we did make note of where we heard and ourselves were kind of maybe looking at like, oh, it asked for evaluation here, but they answered it over here. So clearly the question isn't as direct as need be, or what you maybe were hoping to get at and get more information on, but weren't really getting to it. And so, you know, anytime that there was, I wish we could follow up and ask for more information, we try to make note of that too, and see where, like, looking at the question, was this clear? Does this align with what we're looking for and what the scoring rubric says it will score on? So I think that's a great idea. And maybe that's something that we can build in officially as part of every cycle. And also the committee coordinator, kind of in a more formal way, saying that that is feedback ongoing that will be captured and then maybe can be shared in a recap of, does this capture everything? Is there anything else we need to look at? I think that's a great idea.
I think you also, from staff perspective, will benefit from taking advantage of the volunteered intellectual labor of commission members, as opposed to taking it all on yourselves to do that, which is that, I mean, that's what we're all signed up for. So, you know, you don't have to shoulder that burden exclusively.
Right, so we can definitely build that in.
Well, I tend to agree, Jason, with you about the commission review. I think commissions should maintain the current level of kind of review of the applications. You know, we split them up, and we have an initial calibration session, we split them up, and then we come back and rate them. I think there's value, and I think it's important to do that. What I do think on the other end, though, and this is beyond the scope of this committee, but it also came up at the offsite, I really think that there should be more delegation by the full commission to the committees to make these decisions. Either, and I don't know whether the statute permits this, but if it does, I think the commission should either fully delegate to the committee to make the decisions, or if they don't want to fully delegate, then at least just put it on a consent agenda at a commission meeting so it could be approved quickly unless somebody has some comments or concerns. Because the way it is now, we devote time at commission meetings to reviewing the committee action. I suspect not that many people at the commission really even listen half the time to the presentation. They just kind of rubber stamp what the committee does anyway, more or less. So I just think it would be a much more efficient use of the time if we just let the committee make the decision. And again, that's not for this committee to decide, that's for the commission to decide, but that was one of the things that came up at the offsite.
Yeah, I think there's logic to that, and we've talked then that with the breakout groups of, doing that's how we review each of them. Like each group is working, one individual is working with a couple staff members to do a packet of 3 or 4 or whatever to try to keep things moving along, but also get a commissioner's eyes on it. I think that level of delegation is really effective. So I tend to agree with you. And then also not making it a big commission thing, because then delegating some of it, but you're still having a commissioner involved, which makes sure that you're getting that level of review that presumably grantees want.
Yeah, also, I don't know why the full commission has to look at budget carryover requests. That seems ridiculous to me. If this committee approves a budget carryover request of $30,000, why that has to come before the full commission seems crazy.
It's currently, stated as like who has authority, but something, the commission can change.
I mean, that's not
I agree.
statutorily required, I don't think.
No, it's in the functional matrix, which is currently like the governing authority that establishes based on the percentage of the change who has authority to approve, which can be changed if the commission wants to do that.
All right, I'm shutting up now. And Angela, great job. Your first.
Yes.
Thank you. Forgive
Thank
the
you,
bump.
Angela, and thank you to all staff, and also great job to Eloina. Thank you for providing a motion on something. I appreciate that, especially given we're so few members here.
And Jason, you too. Is this your first meeting that you chair?
This is my first meeting as chair. Yeah.
All right, well done.
Lots of firsts going around.
Mhm.
Funny for everyone.
It's great.
All right.
We don't need
That-
formal adjournment motions. We can just go, I was going to say go home, but we're already home. We can just turn our computer.
How about we'll have a motion for everyone to stay dry.
Yeah. Don't
Stay
move.
safe and don't get flooded.
Stay safe,
But yeah,
everyone.
thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Have a good
Thank
day.
you.
Bye.